Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is always an honour to rise in this place on behalf of the residents of Portage-Lisgar, those that call South Central Manitoba home proudly. And I'd like to start today with a glaring example of Liberal incompetence buried in the Budget Implementation Act. This government is sheepishly backtracking on their so-called anti-greenwashing rules in the Competition Act, rules that they rammed through this House just last year in Bill C-59. Now remember those. In their ideological zeal to police every environmental claim, the Liberals demanded businesses back up statements with, quote, internationally recognized methodologies, imposing rigid tests that invite frivolous lawsuits. Now what happened? Reality happened, and it hit hard. The Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board rolled back its own net zero portfolio commitment, with experts linking it to these changes. The Royal Bank of Canada ditched its $500 billion sustainable finance pledge and stopped disclosing key green metrics, fearing penalties. The rules created a chilling effect as businesses halted legitimate green claims to avoid this red tape nightmare. Even the Competition Bureau's guidelines couldn't save this mess, as industry feedback poured in about this unworkable burden. Now the Liberals are quietly relaxing it to, quote, adequate and proper substantiation and banning private lawsuits, admitting their overreach without any apology. Yet again, we are handed another policy straight from the activist ivory tower, which was so divorced from the real-world consequences that it quietly gets tossed in this bill. And the worst part is, these aren't harmless daydreams. Every time government chases one of these activist-crafted fantasies, real people are the ones paying the price. Now, while the activists congratulate themselves for a job well done, Canadians are left to deal with higher costs, fewer choices, and a government that seems allergic to anything resembling common sense. Now, personally, as a strong proponent of getting big projects built in this country, a place where it unfortunately has become next to impossible to get anything done, I'm quite upset that there were no changes in this legislation to the broken impact assessment process the Liberals created in the first place. Instead of fixing their mess, the Liberals have created a new bureaucracy with the Major Projects Office. Now, it is still too early to tell if this office will succeed in any way, and so far, they have only announced projects that basically have already been approved or are already under construction. And out of those 11, they think only 2 will be deemed projects in the national interest. But at its core, what this office is doing is providing a, quote, concierge service for the cherry-picked projects from this Prime Minister that this Prime Minister has decided with moving forward on. The mere fact that they need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to hire countless new bureaucrats and probably a bunch of consultants to shepherd projects through this maze of regulations is indicative of how bad things have gotten in this country. Now, make no mistake, the government is picking winners and losers. Whoever has the best lobbyists or friends in the PMO can get their project referred to the Major Projects Office and get it sent to the front of the line. It's basically like the Air Canada Super Elite program. A select few just stroll down the red carpet, breeze through their own priority security line, sail past check-in, while everyone else gets bumped, stranded on the terminal floor, and stuck on hold for hours hoping anybody just picks up. Because they've made it so impossible to get projects built, and if we just step back here for a second, and we will quickly see that hundreds of billions of dollars, over $500 billion of investment has fled this country over the past 10 years. The outflow of capital is simply remarkable and sad. We saw how their ill-thought-out emissions cap, which was very much a production cap, got abandoned. We saw their ludicrous EV mandates get put on ice to buy them some time to figure out how to get themselves out of that mess. We have seen ideology trump reality time and time again. And now we see a Liberal caucus that seems to be ripping apart at the seams as they struggle to reorient themselves. Now, I'll admit it has been something to watch former Liberal environment ministers get a little hot and bothered as their once sacred flagship policies are quietly tossed overboard. And to be fair, the one who just resigned at least had the decency to walk away from the chauffeured car and the extra salary instead of twisting himself into a pretzel trying to defend all of these recent backflips. Now, just yesterday, I asked the new Minister of Environment a straightforward question. Have they given up on meeting their emission reduction targets? Her answer? Pure bureaucratic gibberish. So tangled you would need a map and compass to navigate your way out of it. She couldn't bring herself to say what everybody already knows. After a decade of failed policies, they are nowhere near hitting these targets. It has been all pain for no gain. And don't just take my word for it, Mr. Speaker. The Environment Commissioner himself says the Liberals now boast the worst record in the entire G7. Well, they have chased away hundreds of billions of dollars in investment and nickeled and dimed families for heating their homes and filling up their cars. Their policies have still failed spectacularly. Now the new minister tells us that they'll unveil new measures to meet their targets sometime next month. Now, forgive me for not popping the champagne on this one, Mr. Speaker. We've all seen this movie before, and the sequel is never better than the original. The chances are that this will be yet another round of environmental policies destined for the same shelf where all of their other failures go to die. And let's be honest, when a government this far behind suddenly insists that they're still on track, what they're really signaling is a whole heap of new regulations and taxes so heavy-handed that they could bring our economy to a halt. We know one of the ideas that they support, Mr. Speaker, which is the UN's new net zero carbon tax on shipping. The Liberal Minister of Environment insisted just yesterday that imposing this UN-backed net zero shipping tax, potentially hitting $500 per ton. Let's think about that in the Canadian context. We weren't even at $100 per ton. $500 per ton will not drive up the cost of everyday items for Canadians. But I live in the real world, where businesses don't just eat these taxes out of the goodness of their hearts, they pass them straight down onto you and I and every other Canadian. Now, if I were expected to take the minister at her word that they haven't abandoned their 2030 target, then whatever else they're cooking up must be an absolute doozy, because my goodness, they have a lot of ground to make up. Now, I ask this not rhetorically, but earnestly. What is the point of having a Net Zero Accountability Act when absolutely no one, no minister, no department, no government will ever be held accountable for any of their failures? And to move on from the environmental failures of this government, equally important is what has been excluded from this legislation. Now, fortunately, Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government decided not to proceed with their disastrous idea to strip faith-based organizations of their charitable status. But that this idea was even proposed is extremely concerning. Now, I've had hundreds of my constituents write me and agree with the idea that they should never be stripping faith-based organizations of their charitable status. These charities support the most vulnerable in our society, filling a crucial gap that the state simply can't. And the economic benefit is clear. Cardis research shows that for every dollar a congregation spends, the local community receives $3.39 in economic benefit.
Amen.
So why even raise the prospect of revoking their charitable status? It's clearly not for fiscal reasons. The best explanation seems to be that the Liberals want to divide Canadians for political gain. This has become an extremely common trend under this government, and it's happening in real time. And just this week, Mr. Speaker, we learned that the Liberals have secured the Bloc support for their Combating Hate Act, yet another attempt to police the thoughts of Canadians. And what's the deal that they have struck? Making amendments to criminalize sections of sacred texts. Mr. Speaker, this is completely unnecessary. The government already has the tools that it needs to prosecute those who promote violence and genocide. And adding insult to industry, the same member who's proposed policing biblical verses was just now made the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. So I say to my Liberal colleagues, stop attacking the inheritance from our ancestors for your political gain. Canadians are tired of it, whether it be your tacit support for tearing down statues, belittling symbols of national importance, or a general pursuit to shame our heritage. Canadians do not want a government that wages war on their values, their faith, and their heritage. They want a government that supports the vulnerable, that respects the contributions of charities, and unites Canadians rather than dividing them. They want a responsible government that acts with common sense. They are not getting it with this Liberal government. Canadians deserve better, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Yeah.
Questions and comments. Question et contact. Honourable member for Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the honourable member opposite for his comments today. I was greatly encouraged to hear him refer to the need for us to maintain robust and effective climate and environmental policies in this country. I couldn't agree more. I think it's fair to say that many Canadians, Mr. Speaker, at least for the last 35 years or so, have not associated the Conservative Party with a strong environmental record, though there is a rich lineage of conservative environmental policy going back before that. Could the member share with this House what his party supports in terms of measures to support a clean environment, reduce our emissions, and improve the health of Canadians?
The honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. Let's look at the root word. Conserve and conservative. We are conservationists at our core. What we believe in is taking care of our natural landscapes. People consistently in polling care about clean air, clean water, and protecting our natural landscapes, because I represent a whole bunch of people that live, work, and play on the land, and they are the best conservationists and the true environmentalists, and I will always fight back against some concrete jungle, ivory tower policy idea trying to be imposed on the people that I represent, that, as it turns out, as evidenced by the Environment Commissioner's own report, are not working. This Liberal government's policies have been an abysmal failure, have been all pain and absolutely no gain.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Mirabel.
The honourable member for Mirabel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Finance Minister has boasted about investing $115 billion over 5 years through Budget 2025. But when you look carefully at the numbers, you realize that over 5 years, from coast to coast to coast, there will be only $9 billion in new spending, $5 billion of which will be for building new hospitals and clinics. So it'll be $4 billion over 5 years for 10 provinces and 3 territories, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to know whether the colleague feels that that is enough. I'd also like to hear his thoughts on why there's such a marked difference between the Minister of Finance's invented numbers and the actual reality on the ground.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for the question. A nearly $80 billion deficit is most definitely enough. I think I also have real questions as to where this government is spending its money, because clearly it is not reaching the people that it needs to. I am a firm believer in investing in local infrastructure. In my rural communities, we have much aging infrastructure that is in need for renewal, but too often, as just like everything else under this Liberal government, they decide to pick winners and losers, and it is often the forgotten rural communities that people like myself and many colleagues across on this side of the aisle represent get so frustrated when they decide to put crazy ideas as strings attached to any sort of funding. At the end of the day, we need to let our local governments decide how best to spend the money, and the federal government needs to get out of the way and let local communities decide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I really appreciated the perspective and the views of my colleague. I would like him to respond to this. This government has indicated they're going to increase spending in national defence and make us the armed forces that we should be. However, at the very same time, they are cutting in every department. And at that moment, those of us that are studying suicide in veterans' lives found out that they are stressed to the nth degree because they thought, that's where they're going to go, that's where they're going to go. Sure enough, our veterans are facing the largest cut, $4 billion, more than any other department. Do you see this as a good method of increasing recruiting?
So before I recognize the member for Portage-Lisgar, when using the "you" can't speak to the member directly through the chair has no views. I invite the member for Portage-Lisgar to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to my honourable colleague for a very good question. I've had a number of conversations recently with some folks back home, as we have an air helicopter training facility there, as well as some veterans who I think have said, A, the top-up on salary is appreciated, but certainly are concerned about the cuts and what impact that could have on our veteran services. But again, the idea of investing in our military is a very sound one, but there are structural, fundamental issues in the way that we go about procuring things in this government, in this country, particularly when it comes to our armed forces, that we need to be very mindful of to find ways to improve outcomes. But absolutely, in every way, every day, we should be supporting and thanking those who serve in uniform to protect our country. Hear, hear.